It's wonderful to have you all. Michiki Morgan Worldwide is an intercultural leadership development firm. We are based out of Atlanta, but we serve clients nationwide and worldwide, literally worldwide as well. And today I have my wonderful partner in crime, Dr. Tim Jansa. If you want to introduce yourself, Tim, please go ahead.
Sure. So, I mean, she's already said my name. So, uh, maybe a little tidbit about myself. I'm a leadership and organizational development coach and consultant. I specialize primarily in higher education and the nonprofit world, but I've done a lot of corporate trainings in the past, facilitations. My background really is language and intercultural training, which is funny because it's extremely relevant to the kind of work that we're doing here. But I'm also very happy and honored to be the coaching lead for Michiki Morgan, especially for our bench of amazing coaching professionals for our higher ed group. So I'm very happy again to be here in Nozomi to be part of your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's been a blast having you as our coaching team lead. As Tim said, we have absolutely phenomenal coaches that we're serving a very important group of clients. So yeah, it's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. It's the beginning of spring. I'm originally from Japan, and as a Japanese, spring is truly the beginning of the year. School starts in April for Japan. Our traditionally the fiscal year starts in April. So for Japanese corporates companies, April March is the traditional fiscal year, unlike the calendar year. So yeah, April has a special meaning for me personally. Being Japanese, it's the season where the beautiful cherry blossoms are in full bloom. Um, I know a lot of my friends and colleagues have been visiting Japan last year, this year, because I guess just because, but also because the yen is so weak these days that especially for people with US dollars, it's a wonderful place to go because your dollar can go really far right now. And I think I saw a survey that for people in the US, I think Japan was the top place to visit in either 2025 or 2024. Anyhow, yeah, it's April. So today, Tim, what are we going to talk about?
Well, I think what we're going to do today, what we're trying to do after several conversations about boundaryless leaderships and the three C's. We talked about capacity and capacity building. We talked about collective wisdom.
Yeah.
And today I think we're trying to bring it together a little bit and tie it into co-creation and how it all kind of comes together and how that affects leaders. So we're going to talk about some more actionable ideas and tools for leaders to kind of really bring out the best in their teams. So today we're also going to connect a little bit the individual leaderships to team leadership. So we're trying to basically create this nice little package of boundaryless leadership and trying to explain how truly boundaryless it actually is when you're putting it all together. So I'm really excited about today's
Yeah,
conversation.
sounds great. Awesome, awesome. So thank you for that. And before we dive in, we
Always,
do
always.
our a little check-in question
Yeah.
that we enjoy doing so that you all listening, watching can get to know us a little bit better, not just the leadership work, but us as humans. So I have a question for you.
Mhm.
Um, so the question for today is, what was your first job?
That's an interesting question because it's not that easy to answer because what do you really call a job? So I taught piano for a little while, so that was one of the things. I think my first real job, I guess, was an internship that I did at my dad's company in Germany, where I grew up. Um, and that really kind of helped me hone my, well, at least initially, some uh, organizational skills, um, analytical skills. It was is a lot of just paper pushing and sorting and organizing, which comes very naturally to me. So I think that was one that I definitely remember and would probably call my first real job. But the other one that comes to mind is when I came to the US back in 1996, I was a graduate teaching assistant. So that was the first time I was really like on my own, completely really collecting a salary. And even though I'd been to the US many times before, living on my own, and trying to, and I think that's the big thing, trying to build a brand around myself, when you're teaching, trying to really find a way to work with this group of people who at that age are not that much younger than I was then. Um, that really was a challenge, and I learned a lot just trying to bridge this. Well, we're very close in age, but yes, I'm in a position of authority here. I'm going to be grading you. However, I don't want to be, the all-knowing authority here. So that first teaching job that I held for 2 years while I was working on my graduate degree for the first time, that was probably the first real job, I would say, and that also has had the greatest impact long term. What about you, Nozomi?
Cool. Well, before I answer my question, what did you take away the most from your teaching job?
It's one term, one expression, and concept I learned is the concept of power differential.
Mm,
Um, and that is that you formally, yes, you're here, but you want to make sure that you keep it noticeable, especially in this country, right? So the US, we're a lot more egalitarian in our expectations of how we interact with our superiors. If you go to other countries, including Germany, but then you go to, I mean, you, of course, you're an expert in Japan, for example, and in East Asian countries. I've been tutoring somebody in Ukraine for a while, and I learned a lot from him about leadership there and the expectations. There, the differential is has to be kept at a certain distance. You have to embody the expert, the person in the know. Because if you don't, if you lower that, you're going to undermine your credibility, and you're undermining the way people see you as a leader. Whereas here in the US, it's a little bit different. So I think that was probably the biggest takeaway, to kind of try to balance this out. Yes, I'm in charge. I'm going to be evaluating you in some form, yet I still want to be approachable. I want to be seen as somebody who does things in a way that most benefits the folks I'm teaching, facilitating for, my team, so to speak. And so I think there's a big leadership lesson
yeah,
that I learned at that point.
yeah, that reminds me, thank you for sharing that. I think that's such a to your point, such a great leadership lesson there. And obviously there's always learnings and lessons from, everything we do. And that's part of, a huge part of the mindset work that
Hmm.
we do through boundaryless leadership and in our coaching and everything that we do is really that there's always a lesson, or I should
Hmm.
say, if you choose to
Hmm.
see, and you have the power to choose
Hmm.
to see that lesson, or to receive that gift, that lesson as a gift. But it also reminds me, especially related to boundaries leadership, what you share right now is how important the context
Yeah.
is, understanding the context. And that's really the essence of boundaries leadership, is that one size does not fit all. Just because leadership style in the US that works really well, or in your team that worked really well, doesn't mean it's going to work really well in the next team or a different context that you're in. So, really having that sensitivity, that curiousness to see, like, oh, what works well here? What can I take with me that worked for me? And what would work well here? Not instead of saying this worked well here, so it must work well there. And if it doesn't work well, it's not me, it's them, which is what we see a lot
Don't
throughout.
impose. I think that's the important thing, especially when you talk about intercultural teams or
Yeah,
global teams, right? That you have a lot of experience with that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I love what you said, and thank you for let me go a little off course and ask you that
Yeah, yeah.
question because I knew there was lots of goodness in there. But I'll go quickly because I want to make sure we have time to talk about the good stuff. But my first job, to your point, it's hard to define what the first job is. But I
Mm,
would say my very first job that came to mind was that when I was in high school, my senior year of high school, before going to college, I had a lot of time because I already knew which college I was going to. Now, when I was in school in Japan, so the system is a little bit different here in the US, so I don't know how it is here, high school here, but, in Japan, once you know which college you're going to, pretty much you're just cruising the rest of your
mhm,
high school life, and, I always wanted to work at a restaurant. I think I don't know, a lot of us, maybe you have a fantasy to work at a restaurant as a waiting staff. That was something I always wanted to do.
mm,
So one of the jobs that I had was, yeah, to work at a cafe in Harajuku, which I think a lot of you know. Harajuku is that street, that cool area where there's a lot of fashion stuff is there.
mhm,
When you see footage from Tokyo, a lot of times you'll see it there. Anyhow, lots of tourists, even back then. And I did the morning shift, which means it's the breakfast shift. So it was just me and one more supervisor. It's just two of us. So a high schooler and a supervisor, two of us working the morning shift. And what I learned from it was super cool because basically it was just two of us. So I had a lot of autonomy, doing
mm,
whatever I want in the way I wanted to. I really enjoyed that. But other cool thing was every morning there was this French gentleman. So this is in Tokyo, but for some reason there was this French gentleman that would always come in the morning. Probably because we were one of the only places open at that time, and perhaps his office was somewhere nearby. But he'll come in and he would have coffee and some Danish. And it was just nice to see that subtle human connection that you
mm.
have. You know, every morning I was looking forward to seeing because I knew he would come in at a certain time. He was always very well dressed. Um, Again, this is stereotypical, so sorry for the French people. This might not be really a French thing, but from a Japanese high schooler mind, beautifully dressed. And he always, you can smell him from a mile away. Like his cologne, very a little bit much, I should
In a good way, I hope.
in a good way, yes.
Okay, alright.
A little bit much, but in a good way.
Yeah.
So he would he'd come through. Yeah, and I just really I don't know, I just it's just those little touches to
Mm,
say good morning to him. We didn't have conversations,
mm,
but it was just, those little smiles and highs, and I
mhm.
hope, that I was able to add a little bit of, energy into his life. But yeah, that was the first job that I really felt like I had a job, I should say, when I was in high school.
And it's interesting that you said that, it's something you wanted to do, right? Because that to me seems to indicate almost like, I mean, if I were to extrapolate that a little bit, it's almost like a servant leader mindset, almost a little bit. If I
Yeah,
were to kind of maybe overdo it a little bit, but if I think people who gravitate toward the service industry, which we are in, I mean,
yeah,
it's professional services. A lot of us go into this field because we want that connection. You talked about the subtle connection with strangers who then at some point, are no longer strangers, but we want to help them, we want to serve them, we want to make their lives a little better. And this is true, for the individuals, true for organizations. That's our goal. And I
mm,
think this is also the most fulfilling. We asked the question several weeks back, what really makes us tick in
yeah,
terms of our what are we most proud of when we in our work. And I think for both of us, definitely for me, is when we can have this impact on an organization, on a team, on an individual, where after we work with them, they're better. They do better. They are better at what they do. They have a more fulfilling outlook, mindset, and maybe I think mindset is that's the word I think we could talk a little bit about today. That seems to be like what I'm reading and knowing you and hearing your story as the first job, Nozomi. I don't know how that lands with you, but
well, Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. I not never, I never, well, I'll say never. It's so interesting, right? You hear it in a different way than I experience it, meaning that
Hmm.
you shed light to something that I didn't notice because I went through it. So this is, I think, a part that's such a gift to have dialogues like
Hmm.
this, having these questions. Um, and this kind of truly leads into the collective, our theme today about tapping into collective genius of your team. But that's where why having intentional conversations are so important.
Hmm.
And in the old days, it might have been called small talk, but not just small talk about the weather, but small talk in a sense of asking questions, because questions opens door into that person, how they think, what is going on. And that is one of the actually, if I can kind of squeeze my way into or move my way into our main
Please, by
topic,
all means.
is as one of the tools that we use and what we teach, what we coach, is to ask powerful questions. So, inquiry. So, there's lots of studies out there. That shows that high performing teams compared to performing teams, when they analyze the dialogue, what is the difference? And to summarize it, is the difference with high performing teams is their dialogue is there's more inquiry,
Hmm.
more questions around it. And you look at the low performing teams, it's more what we call telling you what to do
Yep.
type of conversations. So less discussions, less inquiry about like, okay, you do this, do it this way. And both type of conversations have meanings and places to be. But if we come back to focusing on our theme and what we believe that is most needed now in the time of change, is that how do you really tap into that collective genius, collective wisdom of your team, is having the ability, having this tool in your toolbox to be able to ask questions so that your team, you're able to empower them, you're able to um, pull out these
Hmm.
ideas, experience, wisdom that you individually as a leader do not have, and creating these connections. So that's one of the proven and practical tools as leaders that you can
Hmm.
use. That is very easy. Easy meaning I don't mean easy in a way that
Yeah.
um, how do you call it? It's not easy in a way that you can do it without thinking. But I when I say easy, it's that you don't have to buy
Yeah.
like a million. You don't have to. It's not like you have to implement a system. Like the ERP system, kind of like you don't have to buy equipment to do it. It's something that you can do immediately. So sorry,
It's
that
leaders as coaches, really, isn't it? I mean,
yes,
that's what it boils down to. Because one of the things that we do as coaches is ask questions. And you know what you mentioned earlier when I shared my observation with you, and then just so how does that land with you? I mean, this is a very typical coaching conversation, and it's amazing how much insight you sometimes can gain when somebody shares their impression of what you had shared with them, and then you reflect back. But one thing that questions do. I think there are multiple layers that we could peel back here. Questions establish trust because they indirectly show that or show that you admit that you don't have all the answers. If you genuinely ask a question, I mean, the genuine part here is, I think, is really important, right? You don't want people to feel like you're just asking questions because you have to, or because it's on a sheet and you just have to check a box. But when you genuinely ask questions and really are interested in what people have to say, you admit that you don't know everything. You empower people to contribute their take, their perspective, their expertise that may be very different from yours, because especially when you're talking to people at a very different level of the organization, their perspective is inherently going to be different. And that really builds trust. or it can lead to building trust. I mean, trust is something that happens that builds very slowly, of course. You can't just say, well, you can trust me, and then everybody's going to trust you. That's not how it works. But this is why the power of questioning is so important. But I think, and you mentioned change, because it's ultimately what it's about, right? I mean, we're leading, we want to affect change in some way, whether it's building a new product, whether it's understanding the market better, whether it's just creating a better flow, better workflows, better policies, procedures, whatever it is, the kind of change that you want. Everything is change, and people are naturally resistant to change. So, one thing that I have noticed is that being able to ask questions is hard for some, really hard, especially asking genuine questions, right? Because they're used to being in a position of power, a position of telling, of instructing, of showing. So it's hard for them. But it all really boils down to some of those assumptions that leaders, or mindset that leaders need in order to be in that space where they can ask genuine questions with genuine curiosity and a genuine will to incorporate what they learn from the folks they converse with, to help create a better outcome overall. So maybe this mindset is something we could explore a little bit. And I don't know what comes to mind, Nozomi, when you hear that, especially in light of talking about boundaryless leadership.
Yeah, yeah. I love what you shared so much, Tim. I think a lot of it is mindset and mindset or what they so we did a series of workshops called Leadership Reimagined. So everyone who's listening, watching, look out for that. That's coming. But with Leadership Reimagined, that's exactly one of the things that we talk about is leadership. There's a older way or traditional old school
Mhm,
way of leadership, and there's a new way to do leadership. And a lot of us, obviously, we have grown up, or our leadership style comes from somewhere, and that somewhere a lot of times is from the leaders around us, or our parents, or teachers, or people that we were influenced by, and they or coaches, right? Like team coaches, or if you're on a soccer team, like your soccer team coach, for example. Um, and you've seen great leadership from there that yielded success. So a lot of times our leadership style is influenced by what we have experienced. And again, I just want to make it clear, we're not saying that a certain leadership style is right or wrong,
mhm,
but we're saying what is needed today looks different. And that different looks like it's more a leader as a, let's put it like someone who can facilitate
mhm,
um, dialogues that will lead to positive solutions
mhm,
or new or innovative solutions. And in today's world, again, not in the past, in today's world, it has to be someone who can guide and lead and facilitate those dialogues, those conversations, because there's not one way is the right way that we all know, because a lot of the problems that we're dealing with, or the challenges, opportunities, are something brand new that there is no answer. We don't know which one's going to be the right one. No one knows. So, and as the senior leader in that on that team, you're not the one who even knows what the answer is. So from a mindset standpoint, I think that's one, to understand it's different, that what is needed is different. Second, right, again, a lot of us, especially if you are in a bigger organization, um, I'll speak from a corporate side, from my own experience, is that a lot of us who went to college and went to like joined an organization, we've been praised or valued by knowing the answers, not always by asking the greatest question.
mhm,
So, which means that again. it's hard to transition from being valued by knowing things from now being able to lead in a different way. So it's what you think the world needs and also what you've been valued. I think there's a big shift in that.
Yeah,
And that takes courage.
yeah.
So where I feel a lot of the work for people that feel a little stuck in this, like, oh, how do I shift? I would say is actually the courage to fail, courage to take risks, courage to do it messily? No, what is the I don't know where the word is. Because whenever you're doing something new, whenever you're doing something in this matter, it's messy. So a lot of the mindset here is also it's everything is trial and error. So there's no immediate success. It's going to be trial and error, trial and error. And the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it. So the courage
Mhm.
factor will come lower because you're getting used to it. Just like riding a bike, all that,
Yeah.
um, and I think that speaks to that in itself is embodying that as a leader also helps your team
Mhm.
members to be like, "Oh, it's okay to take risks. It's okay to fail." Like that's just part of the process.
Yeah.
So I think that's it serves two purposes from that for your own self, but also being that role model for your team.
That's and it's great. Thank you for explaining all this. One thing that also comes to mind there is, of course, a culture. I mean, it's easy to say, well, you have to be vulnerable, you have to ask questions, all this kind of stuff. Of course, we talked about the context earlier. The organization, not every organization at every level appreciates that and wants that,
Right.
right? So if this is your style, which I hope it is, or hope is something that is at least an aspirational style, I hope you're in or listening, you're in an organization that will allow that. And you talked about messiness. I mean, now today's problems, because things have become so much more complex. The world, the organizations, what we're trying to do, and complexity breeds what is generally called wicked problems, and wicked problems are messy. There is no clear one line answer to what needs to be done. And another question that came to mind that I think is important for leaders to ask themselves, you talked about the right way. Who actually knows what the right way, in quotes, is? Um, and if the answer, well, as a leader, is, well, I do, yeah, I would encourage you to say, well, question that. Is it really? Talk to some people to figure out whether your idea of what the right way is actually accurate. Um, because one of the things that I think is so important about activating collective wisdom is when you bring people to the table, when you give people a voice, these change makers who actually may know what is really ailing the organization, what really needs to happen in order to solve a problem. When you bring these people in, you recognize, you appreciate, you activate that wisdom that is inherent, and it may be people who are not at your level. And we talked about this earlier. You bring people with different perspectives in, so these people may actually know what the right way, quote unquote, is for this particular problem, and admitting to it and asking them is so extremely important, again, because it builds trust. It also builds trust in them, or of you. Is that right? Grammatically. So they will trust you because they will learn that it is not about you and your ego, but it is about the greater good, the outcome. And we talked over the last couple of weeks repeatedly about purpose. Purpose is so crucial nowadays in particular. It's not about, pushing buttons and pushing paper and just doing something, output, whatever, but value. You want to have a feeling that you create value. So when you have a leader who you feel is about creating real value and is asking you to participate in that, that creates purpose. And being allowed to contribute with your understanding in this organization, uh, check so many boxes of well-being on the job. So I
Mhm.
think that for leaders to consider that, I think is extremely important.
Yeah, so true, Tim. And one thing that when you said about the right answer or the right way. So in our work, and I personally like to say the the right way is not static. It's
Mhm.
it's not set in stone. It's not the same. So I actually like to call it more in a way of the best way that we know now, or the best decision we could make with the information that we have now. Because it constantly changes. That again, that's the difference from the past where there was a best way
Agility.
to yeah,
It's agility.
exactly, agility, right? Like that, which Tim, you're such an expert in agility, and boundaryless leaders are leaders who are agile, who are flexible,
Mhm.
who can adapt, and going back, adapt to the context. And
Mhm.
that's why we started this conversation with context, but if you don't understand what the context is, then you can't adapt to it either, right? Because you don't know
Exactly.
what to adapt to. So, yeah, there's so much to talk about on this topic, obviously. But Tim, before we close, I want to make sure we talk about the new blog post that you just recently shared to the world. Can you share about that?
Thank you for the pitch, and thank you
Yeah.
for allowing me to pitch this. So this blog post, I always draw a big line between management and leadership. So on my blog at leadershipimagined.com, I there are two articles. There's one longer article that talks about management and leadership and what the difference is. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but recently I wrote another piece that is called "Where Does Change Live?" And one of the things uh, that I put in there is number one, you drive change from the top, but you have to create it from the bottom. But in order to do that, there are certain assumptions, leadership assumptions, and that I think is something maybe we can explore in the future. But one of them, for example, is assume that everybody is trying to do their best, the best they can. This is a hard assumption, but it doesn't come natural to many people. You want you want to assume that everybody wants to contribute with purpose, that they want to be part of something bigger. And so I encourage our listeners to and watchers and audience to maybe go to leadershipimagine.com and look at that, because those assumptions, traditional assumptions versus more modern assumptions that are in line with what boundaryless leadership is really about, I think that's worth exploring, and we will certainly do so in the future. So I definitely invite you to go there and check it out, and we would love to hear what you have to say or what you're thinking.
Yeah, love that. So, so thank you for sharing that, Tim, because that's part of the foundation of fostering trust and collaboration in these
Hmm.
diverse and global teams, right? Having so you call them assumptions. I think for some people you can even call them beliefs.
Yeah.
Like, right? Believing, trusting that that's the truth. Because with or you can have faith in it. I think there's a lot of different ways, depending on who you are, how you might express that. But again, it's a foundation of if you don't have that, then why even bother, right? Trying to foster trust if you can't believe that everyone's there for a reason, and there that their intentions are good. If they're struggling, it's not because they don't want to do good, it's because they are just there's challenges and they need help, or they
Hmm.
don't know what they need help with. We can go on and on about that. So yes, definitely let's talk about this, because there's so much to unpack around this topic, which I super excited about. And then our leadership capacity accelerator program, which is one of the C's of the Boundaryless Leadership framework: capacity, collective wisdom, co-creation. So we have a leadership capacity accelerator. It's a 10-week program, which is a combination of live group coaching, and there's self-study video series. 30 plus videos in there. If you are interested and you want to learn more, I invite you to go to michikimorgan.com. There's a page about the program. So please take a look. We would love, love, love to see you there.
And we'll both be there.
Yes, we'll both be there. So if you want to, work with us deeper, we will definitely be there. So looking forward to having you all.
All right.
Okay. Well, have a great rest of your day, Tim.
You too, Nozomi. It was a
Okay.
pleasure. Can't wait to explore this and see you next week at the Leadership Accelerator. And
Yes.
everybody,
Next week.
take care. Hope your allergies are not going to get too bad with the spring like us. And we will see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.